Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mind Assignment. So, it is Thursday, June 11th, 2026. And today we're talking about the capital of coalition, privilege, platforms, and the real cost of resistance. So, today we need to have an honest, unvarnished conversation about the material reality of activism in an inflated economy. We talk a lot about solidarity, intersectionality, and decolonization in abstract terms. But what does it actually cost to show up? Who has the luxury of being visible? And whose labor is being cut at the knees by the very systems we claim that we want to dismantle? Let's talk about privilege, the creator economy, and what grassroots survival actually looks like right now. So here we are, the material divide. Who affords to resist? When we look at the landscape of modern activism, whether that's fighting fascism in the streets, documenting press actions, or organizing community defense, there is a glaring disparity that we don't name often enough. Capacity is a class issue. Those who hold financial privilege and white privilege possess a systemic runway. Financial privilege means having the disposable income to fund mutual aid without risking your rent. It means having the PTO to take off work for action, or the economic buffer to travel across state lines to show up where the crisis is. White privilege as an implicit layer of protection, a lower statistical risk of state surveillance, police violence, or long term legal ruin. But when you shift the lens to marginalized, disabled, and oppressed communities, the math changes completely. In this hyper-inflated economy, survival is an ongoing battle. When rent, groceries, and basic health care consume every single cent, showing up becomes an act of immense personal sacrifice. For many of us, our capacity is split between physical groundwork and digital organizing, boosting mutual aid, distributing information, and building community networks online because our bodies or our bank accounts cannot sustain constant physical presence. The reality check. Showing up digitally, sharing a fraction of your limited resources, and doing hyperlocal groundwork while under economic siege is a heavy lift. It is not a lesser than physical activism. It is the vital marrow keeping the movement alive. The creator economy and the infrastructure gap. This brings us to the digital space, where a dangerous dynamic plays out every single day. The algorithms and financial structures of platforms like social media are inherently capitalist. They reward those who have already have the infrastructure. Large established creators, frequently those backed by class and financial privilege, have the capital to build high production pipelines. They can travel easily for coverage, hire teams to manage their feeds, and absorb algorithmic shifts. This creates a proven infrastructure that naturally attracts more visibility, more sponsors, and more funding. But here's where the harm happens. When the broader community constantly boosts these massive platforms under the guise of spreading awareness, it often cuts smaller creators out at the knees. Hyperlocal, BIPOC, disabled, and marginalized creators are doing the foundational, dangerous, and grinding work on the ground. Yet their voices are overshadowed by larger platforms that consume the community's limited attention and financial backing. True solidarity from large creators cannot just be a passive shout out. It requires a deliberate systemic redistribution of visibility. It means leveraging their massive infrastructure to actively elevate smaller creators, stepping back so marginalized voices can speak to their own lived realities, and directing the flow of capital down to the grassroots level where it is desperately needed. Then let's take a look at decolonization and the trap of the white savior. To fix this, we have to look at the internal culture of our activism spaces. If we don't intentionally apply a framework of decolonization, we will end up reproducing the exact same hierarchies we are trying to abolish. Identity and ethnicity are not monoliths, and treating marginalization as a single uniform experience erases the specific historic and ongoing struggles of different communities. When activism spaces center Western, colonial, or highly corporate frameworks of organizing, like relying on top down leadership or prioritizing corporate branding over community care, they become inherently exclusionary. This environment is breeding ground for performative activism and white saviorism. We have all seen it. Individuals or large creators use marginalized struggles to build their own moral capital or boost their personal brands. They take up space, position themselves as a definitive voice of a movement, and crowd out the very people that they claim to protect. Worse, saviorism creates physical danger. When someone enters a space without carrying the same systemic risks as the people living there, they often make reckless decisions. They treat the movement like a content opportunity, leaving the local marginalized community to clean up the wreckage and face the state retaliation long after the cameras stop rolling. True inclusivity means opening up spaces, lowering the barriers to entry, and ensuring that those most impacted by the system are the ones directing the strategy. So, grassroots reality and the key to excess. Let's finalize this with a dose of grace and reality here. Many of us are doing our absolute best to learn, unlearn, and survive in incredibly dire times. Because we are all working through our own layers of systemic trauma, conflict is going to happen. Expecting perfect ideological alignment or flawless execution across the board is unrealistic, and frankly, it leads to rapid fracturing and burnout. But alignment isn't the goal here, liberation is. The key to helping at the grassroots level is recognizing that we must intentionally change the structure to make things accessible for those who are typically barred from success. Imagine how many more dedicated, powerful people would be out in the streets fighting fascism daily if they weren't restricted by financial burdens, medical inaccessibilities, or the exhaustion of sheer economic survival. When those with privilege choose to take up less space, when large platforms choose to share their infrastructure, and when we prioritize real mutual aid over performative allyship, we chip away at those barriers. We create a sustainable ecosystem where freedom from financial restriction allows the collective to rise together. Thank you for listening and reading, as always, and doing the work where you can, how you can. Until next time, this has been The Mind of Saimarie. Remember, the mind is the most important story that we'll ever tell. Until next time.